podcast. I am so excited to be here with you all today and really talk about the genesis of the craft and calling, why we started, why we're here, what even is it, and ultimately where are we going with it. I want to start with our mission, why we exist in the first place. And we really exist to bring about your legacy, to help tradespeople's owners, from founders and owners and everything in between, operators. It is so important to me that we are working to be able to cultivate men and women in the trades so that at the end of their lives, they have something very tangible to hand over, to show for their life. When I was, 26, 27, I got involved in our family's 100-year painting business. I started working with my dad more closely to bring it online. And what I found was in sitting down with his customers and sitting down with the team, I found that there was actually just this beautiful and kind of unfolding of who he is that I had no idea about. You know, when somebody is on the job site between 9 and 5 every day and you never actually get a chance to encounter them in work mode, there's a whole side of them that we never really get to experience as the family, as the ones who love the person who's on the site and just never kind of get that window into who they are. And so in this process of sitting and talking with customers and talking with his crew and really understanding the values that he has instilled into the business, it started in 1922 by my great-grandfather and has been passed down since. So myself and my siblings and I were all the fourth generation. And so in this time of sitting with my dad and really getting to know what he's built, my respect for him has grown significantly. And ever since then, I've been getting more and more involved because it became clear that my brothers didn't want to take over the business. And so I raised my hand and said, well, I want to carry it into the fourth generation. Because what my dad was facing was that the business was so tied to him that the thought of scaling just felt insurmountable. It was this massive climb that he would have to kind of conquer in order for him to scale the business. If he wanted to sell it, well, there wasn't a ton to sell because it was so much tied to him. There were no systems set in place where it was functioning apart from him. And then succession, my brothers didn't want it. So sale, scale, and succession all were just kind of ambiguous, and there really wasn't a clear vision for the company to proceed. And so my dad was like, well, maybe I'll just kind of shut it down. And that's when I raised my hand a couple years ago and said, no, I really feel like the value of the brand, the value of the equity therein, he's built something so important. And my grandfather and my great-grandfather have too. So it was just a tragedy to me to think of this business just ceasing to exist because the men in the family didn't want to take it over. So raised my hand, and actually my brother got involved with me, and we became partners in the family business in 2021. And y'all, it was so exciting to see the business grow and evolve since then. It doubled within 2 years of us getting involved. And there's a lot of lessons we learned along the way. There's a lot that we saw that needed to be changed, a lot that we saw that could just be amplified because it was already being done so well. And there were a lot that needed to be added to it. So the change, the amplification, and the addition, really, there was so much that we needed to do it together. It was way too overwhelming for my dad to be able to think of all three of those aspects in working in isolation, working solo. And as such, by way of getting involved with him and helping him on the business front and also the branding and marketing front, but then also just seeing and really coming to know the 30 plus years where he had done it by himself. Man, I love and respect my dad more today than I ever have. And so much of that is because I have really come to understand him. I've come to understand what he's built. And I'm so grateful for this opportunity. Therefore, I have been observing along the way, not just the respect for him, but also thinking about what could have been had he had support along the way, had he had people in the wings, people really supporting him, and where he didn't have to do it all alone, not just in terms of leadership flanking him, but also being a part of a team, being a part of something bigger than himself, where everybody, maybe they all own their own businesses. Maybe they're all integrated in some regard on the owner or operating side of things, whether they're in the fields, whether they're in sales, whatever part they fall in terms of the role and position of the trades business, imagine what would have happened along the way if my grandfather had had this, much less my dad. And so, in so existing in the family business and observing what's been missing, I I have felt really, really compelled to start the crafting calling as a result. Not just because I've seen the benefit and value of really understanding what my dad's doing. My respect for him has grown exponentially. I know that there could have been so many alternative ways looking back over our family's history and life, where if my dad had the support, maybe it would have allowed for things to be easier for him. And I've also worked on kind of the other side where I've served as fractional chief marketing officer for a $75 million waterproofing business. I've worked on the construction side of things, and we've done B2B and B2C. And I've just seen what happens when there is a clear vision and when there's not, when there's a community and when there's not, and when there's an actual real plan and systems in place so that it's not tied to the owner, but they actually are able to exist in the freedom of creating the life that they actually want. And so, legacy is the ultimate mission for the crafting calling, because my dad deserves to have a legacy that is full and rich, that we know. Because as I was looking into the word legacy, it's actually derived from the Latin root word. It's what's a legacy. That's the original definition, or the Latin word that it came from. And it meant a body of persons sent on a mission. And in kind of the mid-century 1500s, it really transitioned to, and as it evolved throughout that time period as well, it lended to more so a last will and testament at the bequest of something and someone. It's something's being handed down. And legacy now today means a physical or intangible asset. And y'all, if we're not with intention creating a legacy that is able to then be passed down, there's something so devastating about looking back at our life and not really having much to show for it. And I mean, actually, something physical to show for it, in addition to the intangible, because this book called Die with Zero talks all about the amalgamation of our life is the conjuring and the kind of the building up of experiences. And that's where, man, that's where the emotional currency lies. So we've got the financial currency of like, hey, here's the money in the bank. We've got the emotional currency of the experiences and memories made in terms of relationships, and especially with family. That's what's been built. And then we also have this whole other side where, okay, here's the physical business that I'm going to be able to hand over to you. Here's the systems in place. Here's the brand equity that's been built. Here's the people. Here's everything you need to be able to run this business when I step back. But because we're not thinking with legacy in mind, we're not creating accordingly. And so, as I've been really leaning into, okay, legacy, and that's the outcome, and that's really why the craft and calling exists. Let's examine these two words, craft and calling. Obviously, craft, it's very apparent what we are talking about. It's really the actual trade, what we spend our days 9 to 5 doing. And then the calling is really, okay, what's the end goal in terms of that legacy? What do I actually want to leave behind? What do I actually feel called to creating on the financial, emotional, and physical front, that then I can all kind of lump together and pass along down to my family and say, here is my legacy packaged up nicely for you. But it's not, again, it's not just the financial, it's not just the money sitting in the bank. It's also the experiences and the emotional equity that we're building with our family over the years, rather than focusing so much on the financial side or focusing so much on the business side that we actually forget who we're doing this for in the first place. I've worked with so many founders, leaders, executives who exit their businesses, have so much success on the financial front and on the business front, but then the relational equity is slim to none. And then they realize that they actually lost the vision and the why along the way. Ultimately, their craft took over their calling, and they lost their purpose in why they were doing it in the first place. One leader said that he was walking into his bedroom late at night, and his wife was sitting in the bed, and she looked at him and she said, when you started out doing this, you were doing it for our family. But I don't ever want you to I don't ever want to hear you say that again, because you're not doing it for us anymore. You've made all the money. Now we just want you. And that, my friends, is something that we really focus on in the craft and calling, because relationships are, at the end of the day, connection and community. That is what we were made for. If you look all the way back into the very opening of Genesis in the Bible and biblical text, God is walking with Adam. Adam is the first man ever made, and in the story, Adam is naming the animals, and he's existing in this beautiful place of Eden, and it's perfect. Everything's wonderful. There's absolutely no harm, no sin, no danger, no enemy. There's nothing for him to conquer. He's just existing in the peace of Eden, and his daily tasks is naming the animals and tending to the garden, and he's walking with God. So it's as unified with the divine as we can possibly get. Yet within that time and space, God looks at Adam and says, "It is not good for man to be alone," even though God is with him. So when we look at legacy, we're looking at the emotional equity which we're building over the course of our lives and the relationships that are impacted as a result of that. And we have to be analyzing the health of our families, the health of our community, of the health of our connections with people on a lateral level. So when we're analyzing, what are we really building here? Yes, putting money in the bank. Yes, building a business, honing your craft, but keeping the calling, which includes family and spirituality as well. Because we end up, if we lose that, man, we end up losing ourselves, because the physical business and the money are outside of us. What we care about and who we are is what encompasses the calling. And that, at the end of the day, both of those two hand in hand, the craft and the calling, is ultimately what conjures our legacy. Yet when we think about both hand in hand, the bridge that ties them together is creation. We need to be proactively creating on the business. What's missing? What are the systems that need to be in place? How does AI fit into this? What's the brand equity like? How are we showing up against our competitors? How are we showing up for our customers? Are our customers actually happy with what we're producing? Isn't that a real question that we need to be analyzing? So, creating on the craft side, and then creating on the calling side. Creating with intention. Y'all, I've thought about this so much. How much are we actually sitting and considering, am I actually living in accordance with the ideal that I have set forth that would allow for me to look back at the end of my life and say, I have created the legacy which I'm proud of? So, what that means is, who do I want to be as a father? Who do I want to be as a husband? Who do I want to be as a sister, as a mother? Who do I want to be as, yes, also a business leader, as a colleague, as an employer? Who do I want to be as a leader in the community? So we need to, with intention, create the roles that are set forth, because without intentional and conscious creation of our calling and our craft and the roles that encompasses both, we're effectively going to be living in an autopilot, apathetic state, doing what we just have seen mirrored for us rather than intentionally creating that which we want. And so, what the craft and calling is that it's really leaning into both sides, craft and calling, with creation as the bridge, as the thing that binds it together and allows for the existential concept of the calling to be grounded in tangible practice and application, so that these principles that we espouse and verbally speak out as something that we want, we actually have the practices that really ground them and ensure that we can, at the end of our lives, look back and say, yes, I am proud of the life I lived. And so when we think about what makes our calling a little bit different, our community a little bit different. There's something here where I'm just going to call out the elephant in the room. Obviously, I'm a woman, no surprise there. There's going to be a different angle and approach to the craft and calling in terms of the content, in terms of the conversations, the connections that take place. There is going to be an activation of the right brain along with the left brain. So the left brain is what is more so dubbed and identified as the masculine, which is organization, systems, processes, data, that needs to be harnessed and leveraged for the success of our craft and for the success of our goals and the vision that we have for the company, and on the financial side as well. But the right brain is the creative side. It's more so the nurturing. It's engaging with the customers. It's what do the scripts say when we actually pick up the phone and greet our customers. It's the messaging that's going out on the website. It's actually taking time to ensure that we're having that bridge between our craft and our calling. It's the activation of 50% of what constitutes the human being. And frankly, Harvard found that 95% of our purchase decisions are made in our subconscious, which is where our emotions live. We need to be activating both sides of our brain, which is where I come in bringing and reinforcing the feminine, and also where you come in reinforcing the masculine. The ideal is that you and I both exist as a holistic, whole functioning, full-fledged human where both sides of our brain are activated, the masculine and the feminine. That is a powerful individual. However, as we look at really kind of our roles and where we fit in as it pertains to the conversations, I really am eager for this to be member led. I'm eager for every single one of you to step into this role of not sitting on the sidelines, but being an active participant, sharing what's worked, sharing where you failed, where we all together experiment with tools and technology that's evolving over time, because these next 18 to 24 months around AI and what's being done there is going to dramatically change business forever. And you and I need to be on the forefront of that. We're also going to be partnering with other communities and other leaders coming in and talking to us so that we really can hear from the best. We're also going to be incorporating our marriage partners, whether you're the female in the business and you bring in your husband, or you're the male in the business bringing in your wife. Y'all, it is so important. I see time and time again, I'm involved in many masterminds, and I also am privy to many all men's groups where their marriages are all falling apart from the inside out. And so thankfully they have this brotherhood, but their marriages aren't being saved. And so this is a place where I want us to have those real conversations where we actually get deep and we talk about what's really going on on the financial side, the relationship side, the spiritual side, and yes, the business side. Business is going to take the limelight, and it's going to be the primary focus. Yet these other components are so incredibly important, because if we think about real freedom, let's say you actually get the freedom that you want in your business, but then you come home and you've got no one to lie next to you because you've burned the bridges along the way. So the goal for this, creating a legacy, creating a life that you're proud of. And we do this in I call it the 4 C's. We've got 4 key elements that really ensure that this happens. Number 1 is connection. We are a network of community members that really focus on growth. We really lean into the fact that growth is relational, but it starts with us. We have to do the work to actually know who we are, what we want, what is our calling, because your calling is going to be slightly different from mine, and mine's going to be slightly different from theirs. So we need to actually do the work to first establish a connection with our own self. And I consider it as kind of like a vertical line transcending all the way from the divine, God, coming all the way down to me, and that having that really strong vertical connection. Because otherwise, if I'm oriented towards what are they doing, I'm constantly going to be reaching out, grasping for something that isn't actually what I'm called to do in the first place. And then the connection on the lateral level, which is the craft, honing our craft in connection with other people. What are you doing that's actually working? So who are you called to be? That's vertical. The craft is horizontal. And that's really where we have this beautiful and really powerful integration of all of us coming together and honing in generations and genders and industries coming in to see what is working, what is not, what can we try and A/B test and amplify and really change. When I got involved with a couple of these construction businesses, there was a lack of data being collected. And once we got that squared away, then we could actually start testing out different types of messaging with different audiences. So in one sense, we have to really do the deep dive on the connection front laterally and ensure that our craft is in a really good space to then be able to say, okay, now let me get vertically aligned. What am I really called to do now that my business has stabilized, now that I'm capturing the data I need to, now that I actually am ensuring that no part of the customer journey is broken? Now, what does it look like to really strengthen myself, my family, my relationships, and actually cultivate myself to be the leader that I know I can be? Y'all, the goal is that we're tapping into more than the 5 to 10% of our conscious brain that we actually have access to. The goal is that we're really leading from a place of strength from within so that we can withstand. One of our clients, with the change in seasons, they had a really, really dry summer. And man, the numbers did not look good. So who are you when the numbers don't look good? What do you do? And do you have the people around you that can reinforce and remind you of your calling and remind you of the things that have worked for you in the past? Jim Collins wrote this book from good to great. And a lot of what he talks about is just let's go back to the basics. Don't negate and neglect the things that have worked for you in the past. Don't stop doing what's good. And then, yes, you can add more things to it, but let's go ahead and keep the foundation. So in this process of coming together as a community, we're going to analyze what has worked for you in the past as a business. And we're going to do an audit. And it'll be real time, where we're all really having those hard conversations together, and also having the opportunity to go back into our business and ask our teams, hey, can you grab this data for me so that we can talk about it in real time together? So that's number one, connection. We're a network of growth. And I really was talking about the relational component there. Number two is collaboration. And frankly, this is really where that lateral part comes into play, which is what's working. What are you doing right now that has worked in the past, looking at that data and looking at the audits that we can collectively come and say, hey, by the way, I know that this seems so obvious, but are you doing door hangers? Y'all, one of the companies that I've worked with, they grew their business off door hangers for the first 15 years of their business. The last 20 years, they have not done a single door hanger, and they've been paying for every single lead that they've gotten. So let's do the free advertising. Let's go ahead, and anytime you have a salesman go do an appointment, he blankets and canvases the neighborhood with door hangers. Sure, it takes an extra 20, 30 minutes, but it's also really good exercise. And frankly, we probably could all use a little bit more exercise, and we know it works. That's how you built this business. That's how you broke your first million. That's how you broke your first 5 million. And moving forward, it is built on this foundation of going and knocking on doors. Why do we neglect the things that were working? So in this whole process of collaboration, sharing what's working, it's stating, this sounds a little silly, but it worked for me. And it's also saying, I did this massive campaign and it yielded so many results. And it's also, I did this massive campaign and it wasn't worth it. It is so important that we're talking. It is so important that I hear from you and you hear from me, and we all are collaborating in terms of growing and being better together. Because, man, we can go so much further together. Maybe not as fast, but we can go so much farther when we know what our calling is, when we have the support in the community to push us forward. The third C is celebration. And I love this one. Frankly, I am totally my father's daughter. He's a massive proponent of play. He loves to have fun, and I just adore him for it. And celebration is something that, frankly, we really need to make sure that we're doing. We need to be incorporating that as a part of our ethos as an organization, because y'all, how many days do we spend where we're just moving forward with our head down, and we're not actually remembering with gratitude all that came before us? We're not actually looking back and celebrating what's worked. How have I grown? How have I changed? How has my team done really, really well? And the lack of honor can actually lead to a lack of momentum. And so by way of us taking time to honor each other and thus honor our teams, it actually can be the gas in the tank that can move us forward and move us more quickly. So when we think about moving farther in community, in concert with each other, we can move faster with that self-propelled dopamine hit of celebration. And I've seen this in so many leaders. When we self-administer dopamine hits, we move faster. That's just the way the body, mind, and biology of ourselves work. And so with this process, it's actually the fact that we really focus on gratitude. And gratitude is a core ethos of who we are. We don't have space for sideliners. We don't have space for complainers. There's very clear demarcating elements of who we are not and who we are. And we are a community that is grateful, frankly, because then when we look back on the legacy of our lives, man, we've just been compounding gratitude and experiences and financial growth on top of each other over time, so that when we look back, man, are we the wealthiest men and women ever. The last one is contribution. And this is really where we actually give. This is where we really give to each other. So celebration, there's an element of that where we're really receiving, because so many of us, we're the ones leading the charge every day, and we don't actually really get the care and TLC that we might need. And so this place for contribution, this is really where we help each other based on whether you're looking to sell, scale, have succession where you pass it down. Regardless of what your aim is and what your goal is with the business, you have people to literally contribute and say, hey, here's a document, here's a resource, here's a spreadsheet, here's a dashboard, here's a report that we generate, all of which is just going to make us move so much faster. So in this initial space of collaboration, that's really where we're testing and trying new things and kind of being daring, and then also remembering what's working. This contribution is, hey, I'm actually going to give to you something that has actually worked for me in a very tangible way. So this is like a tangible give. And y'all, with these 4 C's, with the connection, the collaboration, the celebration, and the contribution, we are able to operate as a true collective, where we are so much more rich than if we were doing this alone. And the goal, the outcome is legacy. I was on a podcast a couple weeks ago, and I was talking about, what a blessing it is that I'm able to help my dad really in real time create his legacy. Because the reality is that right now, every single day, you and I are creating what will eventually become our legacy. Legacy is in real time. Legacy is right now. Every decision we make, every phone call, every email, every job site visit, every single decision we make every single day of our lives is legacy. We're creators because we are made in the image of the ultimate creator. And so we need to start acting like it and thinking like it. There's a change in the way that we show up every single day when we realize, wow, today matters. There's so much riding on today. And in so doing, we're creating a legacy. And on this podcast, I was talking about this whole process with my dad, where I'm really able to help him create the legacy. Because honestly, if he had died 2, 3, 4 years ago, there wouldn't have been much. There was no paper trail. There was really no content that he had created. There was nothing that would have really helped the business to just be handed over to somebody else or one of us. And not just that, not just on the business side, there really wasn't much in terms of content that he had created that would have helped us to really get to know him. Thank God he's built up such an equity in terms of experiential, relational value. And he's got a whole storehouse of that. And we are rich indeed because of him. But when it came to the business side of things, there wasn't much physically, tangibly to show for it. And as we've been building these last 4 years, there's a lot more. 2 days after I talked about how we're intentionally creating our legacy every single day, how the content we produce and the personal brands that we cultivate actually are part of that legacy. 2 days later, Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And man, I just sat there realizing what a blessing that his kids have podcasts, articles, newsletters, social media posts. He has a whole treasure trove that now is handed to his kids of who he is, who he was, and his legacy, what he cared about, what he was called to, what was his craft. And y'all, we need to be thinking this way. We not in a fatalistic type of mindset, but in the mindset of what a blessing that I get to champion, and I get to be responsible. This is a responsibility to honor all that has been handed to me so that I can then hand it down. And y'all, every single one of us has a legacy that we are currently writing today. We are currently creating. And so in this place, this is where we co-create. This is where we hone the craft. This is where we emphasize the calling. And this is where we really champion each other. Atiba, thank you so much for joining. I see you on Facebook. You said you can't lose your calling trying to gain the whole world with your craft. Ah, I love it. Y'all, it is so important that we don't try to go outside of and beyond that which we're called to right here, right now. And you know what? We can't go create something new if what we have in front of us is broken. So we have to do the work to lean in, clean up, and like I said at the very beginning, we had to have some real changes. We had to fix some things and we had to make some additions. We had to add something new and then we had to amplify. So change, amplify, and addition. But it really takes time for us to do those audits and also hearing from other people on what are they doing so that we can add that in. But our chief responsibility is to first go inward for ourselves, for our business, and then we can blow some steam and blow some oxygen on the fire that is our business and really blow it up so that we can see real growth. But AI isn't going to fix what's broken. And just adding new systems into place on an already broken kind of foundation isn't going to be helpful. We need to actually fix the foundation, and that's what we get to do together. So, with that, thank